My name is Rebecca Ross. I'm 39 years old, and as of last month, I became the highest-ranking active female officer in the North Atlantic Joint Command. Field Marshal, a title they once said I'd never earn, a title they never planned to announce in front of my family. But that's exactly what happened. The security officer didn't look me in the eye. He held the guest list in one hand, the other hovering nervously over his radio. His voice was polite, rehearsed. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Your name's not on the list." I didn't blink, I just nodded. "I have an invitation." I showed it to him, clean official, addressed to me directly. Still, he hesitated. I could see him glance toward the glass doors, toward the ballroom where the ceremony had already begun. Inside, I saw faces I used to call family. My father, my mother, a few distant cousins, all sitting in neat rows beneath a banner that read, "Celebrating Legacy Leadership Commander Landon Ross." My brother, the golden boy, the one they believed in. I took a breath. Not out of anger, but to center myself. I wasn't going to beg to enter, not today, not ever again. And that's when I heard it. A different voice, deep, commanding, from behind the checkpoint. "Welcome, Field Marshal Ross." We reserved the front row. The entire lobby shifted. The young security guard froze. He stepped aside like he had just been struck by lightning. I walked past him without a word. And in that moment, the story changed. I stepped into that ballroom as someone they thought had failed. That's what they'd been telling people for years. That I had burned out. That I was reassigned because I couldn't handle pressure. That I was too reserved, too soft, too invisible. They never expected me to walk in wearing full dress uniform. They never expected the medals, the insignia, the quiet weight of truth I carried across my shoulders. I sat down in the first row, alone, uninvited technically, but no one dared say a word. The commander hosting the ceremony stepped up to the mic, and then right there on a stage meant for my brother, he said it. "This evening we are honored to recognize not only those who carry forward our naval tradition, but also those whose leadership defines the very core of Joint Command. Please welcome our highest honor recipient, Field Marshal Rebecca Ross." That sentence landed like thunder. My family froze in their seats. My mother's hands stiffened around her program. My father's jaw tightened. My brother, standing tall just moments earlier, lost the smile he had carefully rehearsed. I stood. I didn't rush, didn't glance to the side. I walked that long aisle slowly, letting the echo of my boots fill the silence that had once erased me. I didn't look at them, not yet. I didn't need to. Because I had spent years imagining this moment, not for revenge, not for spectacle, but for justice. Quiet, measured, earned. And as I took the stage, as the applause rolled in uneven waves behind me, I knew this wasn't about proving anything to them. It was about reclaiming everything they took for granted. My name, my place, my story. They had told everyone I failed. But failure doesn't wear 5 stars across the collarbone. Failure doesn't return to the room that once shut its door and get invited to the front row. No. That day I didn't just take my seat. I took my name back. They said my name like it was a headline, clear, certain, measured. Field Marshal Rebecca Ross. It wasn't shouted. It didn't need to be. The name had its own gravity now. I heard it ring across the ceremony hall, and for a full second the air didn't move. Even the flag seemed to stop swaying. Then slowly people began to stand, not all at once, not in sync. Some rose out of respect, others out of confusion, and a few, perhaps the ones who had heard my name before, stood because they understood what this moment really meant. I could feel hundreds of eyes tracking me, but I only noticed 3. My mother, sitting in the second row, pressed both hands over her mouth. Her program slipped from her lap, fluttering to the floor like a white flag. She looked as though she had seen a ghost. My father, the retired admiral, sat stone-faced, but his spine, the one he used to straighten with pride for Landon's every achievement, was now slightly curved. He didn't lift his eyes, and Landon, my brother, stood at the edge of the stage, frozen. his smile carefully maintained until now faltered. One corner of his mouth twitched just once before it collapsed entirely. He didn't clap. He didn't blink. I didn't hesitate. I rose from my seat in the front row, where I had been placed by the commander himself. My boots hit the floor with quiet purpose. Each step forward was deliberate, steady, not triumphant, just sure. This was not a victory parade. This was a return. I didn't look at my family. Not yet. I couldn't afford to. If I did, I might feel something I wasn't ready for. Regret, anger, even sadness. But I wasn't here for emotion. I was here for restoration. The distance to the stage felt longer than it should have, like the hallway between memory and truth. Every footstep echoed with the weight of things left unsaid. Apologies never offered. Belief never given. As I reached the stairs, a Marine in dress blues offered his hand. I nodded, declined, and climbed the steps on my own. That too felt right. On the stage, the commander waited with the medal in hand. He met my eyes with quiet affirmation. No speeches, no introduction, just a pin over my heart fastened with care and a whisper only I could hear. They'll write this one down. I believed him. I stepped forward, turned to face the crowd. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was respectful, the kind that only comes after something undeniable takes the room. I scanned the audience, and only now allowed myself to find them again. My father still refused to meet my eyes. His jaw clenched. A muscle twitched in his temple. The man who once said I wasn't made for leadership now sat in the presence of it and didn't know where to look. My mother's hands trembled. I wondered what was louder in her mind, pride or guilt. Landon stared at me like he was trying to recognize someone he thought he buried. His eyes weren't angry, just lost, like he couldn't understand how I had survived. Or maybe deep down he always knew I would. I took a breath. Let it fill every inch of me. Let it carry the memory of every closed door, every silent meal, every time someone used my last name as a wall instead of a bridge. I looked forward again, not down, not back, and I spoke, not loud, just enough. This medal doesn't rewrite the past. It doesn't erase the years I was left off every list. But it does one thing. I paused. The weight of the room shifted. The audience leaned in slightly. It returns my name to where it always belonged. I stepped back. A quiet wave of applause began, soft at first, then stronger. Not wild, not celebratory, but certain, solid. A sound like justice. I hadn't come here to humiliate anyone. I hadn't come to prove I won. I came because justice deserves a seat at every table where it was once denied. And today I wasn't just given a seat. I took my place, with my name, my rank. My silence turned into steel. That was the sound they could never silence again. I grew up in a house that ran on protocol. My father, Admiral Gerald Ross, didn't leave the Navy behind when he came home. He simply brought it through the front door. Our schedules were posted on the fridge like mission briefings. Breakfast at 0600, chores by 0630. Uniforms pressed. Beds tight. Emotions unnecessary. My mother, Elena, played the quiet metronome in the background. She never barked orders like my father, but she enforced them with surgical precision. She ran the household like a well-oiled engine laundry on Tuesdays, grocery day, Thursdays, no exceptions. Her silence wasn't gentleness. It was strategy. She kept order through restraint. And then there was Landon. Landon was the firstborn, the prototype, the pride of the Ross family legacy. He walked early, talked early, won medals before he could spell his own name. When he was 8, my father built a wooden display case in the hallway, just for his achievements. I remember the sound of the hammer, the way it echoed through the walls, like a promise, this is who we are. By comparison, I was quiet, careful. I followed instructions, but never drew attention. I was the kind of child who blended into corners, who answered questions before being asked, who instinctively knew not to interrupt. If Landon was the mission, I was the margin. Family photos were always arranged around him. Centered, framed. I was in the pictures, yes, but rarely in the middle. Sometimes I stood slightly to the side. Sometimes my face was turned or my eyes closed. Once I remember standing too far from the group, and my father told me to step back in line like a soldier who'd drifted off formation. We never hugged in our house. There was no bedtime story, no "how was your day" at the dinner table. Just reports. It was always "what did you do?" Was it completed? What's next? Praise was a form of currency, and Landon earned it in bulk. When he brought home straight A's, my father poured him a glass of iced tea, his version of celebration. When I brought home the same, my mother nodded once and returned to folding laundry. I wasn't jealous, not exactly. Jealousy implies wanting to take something away. I didn't want what Landon had. I just wanted to matter on my own terms. But in our house, value came from visibility, and visibility came from achievement that matched the blueprint. Landon followed the path Naval Academy officer training promotions like clockwork. I chose differently. Even as a teenager, I was drawn to patterns, shadows, the mechanics behind decisions. I read intelligence reports online for fun. I didn't want the spotlight. I wanted the control room. When I told my father I was applying to Army intelligence, he looked at me like I'd announced a career in clown school. "The Army," he said. "You want to spend your life in the shadows?" "No," I said quietly. "I want to spend it making sense of things." He didn't respond. He just walked away. My mother called it a phase. She said, "Maybe you'll transfer later," but I didn't. Because for once, I had found something that felt like mine. Still, even after I left, the rhythm of our house echoed in my body. I woke at 05:30 every morning without an alarm. I polished my boots with the same methodical movements my father taught Landon. I kept my emotions tucked behind discipline, just like my mother. I didn't resent them for how they raised us. But I do remember the coldness. I remember being 10 years old, coming home from school with a scraped knee and my mother handing me a towel instead of a hug. I remember winning a regional debate competition and my father replying, "That's nice." But it's not the Naval Academy. I remember birthdays as timed meals, cake-cut candles, blown photos snapped. No lingering, no warmth. So I learned to stop needing warmth. I built a world where efficiency mattered more than affection, where clarity was comfort, where silence wasn't loneliness, it was control. But sometimes late at night I would imagine another version of me, one who was allowed to be messy, soft, seen. That version never fit inside our walls, so I built new ones, far away, quietly, where I could grow without being measured against a brother who had the family's name engraved in glass, while mine wasn't even on the list. The Army wasn't my rebellion. It was my escape. I didn't choose it to defy my family. I chose it because I needed a space where my last name didn't define me, where I didn't have to explain why I wasn't like my brother, where I could just be Rebecca. I enrolled in Army intelligence without much ceremony. My application went through. My physicals cleared. My acceptance letter arrived in the mail and sat unopened on the kitchen table for 3 days before anyone asked what it was. When I finally told them, my father said, "Huh." That was it. No handshake, no advice, no words of pride. My mother raised an eyebrow and said, "Well, at least it's federal." I shipped out 2 weeks later. No send-off, no packed lunch. Just a curt nod from my father as I closed the front door behind me. At basic training, I watched other cadets receive letters from home care packages, phone calls at designated times. I didn't get a single one. Not during boot camp, not during my advanced training, not even on graduation day. I stood on the parade field in uniform, polished and stiff, waiting to see if they might surprise me. A single seat in the stands was left empty, reserved for my family. It stayed that way. I told myself it didn't matter, that I was used to it, that I didn't need them there to validate what I had achieved. But that empty seat haunted me. Even years later, I could still picture it, still feel its silence. Meanwhile, Landon's career was a headline machine. Naval Academy, commissioned officer, first command at 28. He was on recruitment posters. Navy Times covers university guest panels. He gave speeches at military galas, appeared on local television for Memorial Day specials. People spoke his name like a brand. I used to see his image on billboards and think, that's my brother. Not with pride, with resignation, because every time his face appeared, my own name disappeared a little more. Whenever I came home, if I came home, I was still introduced as Landon's sister. Never as a soldier, never as an analyst, never as a leader. They told neighbors I worked in administration. She's behind a desk, my father would say. She helps with documents. It didn't matter that those documents were sensitive briefings, strategic simulations, threat matrices that shaped entire deployments. To them, it wasn't real unless they could see it on television. And I wasn't on television. That silence deepened with time. I tried once to break through it. I brought home a commendation letter from my commanding officer, an acknowledgement for successfully decoding a high-risk communication network in Kandahar. I left it on the kitchen counter thinking maybe they'd read it. Maybe they'd ask questions. They didn't. My mother used the back of the letter as a notepad for her grocery list. I said nothing, because by then I had learned the pattern. Landon was celebrated for showing up. I had to disappear to be noticed. Even the few times we crossed paths, military weddings, funerals, holidays, he always asked the same thing. You still doing the office thing? I'd nod. And he'd smile, satisfied. As if I had confirmed his belief that I wasn't a threat, wasn't a contender, wasn't part of the game, but I was. I just didn't play it his way. Instead of speeches, I studied silence. Instead of headlines, I studied intelligence briefings. I built my career in the shadows, not because I was hiding, but because I understood that power wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was quiet, sometimes it was patient, sometimes it wore boots that walked through mud instead of red carpets. I wasn't the face of the military, but I was its spine. And while my family praised the medals they could frame, I carried the ones that were never seen, etched into the memories of lives. Saved disasters, averted crises, intercepted before the news even knew they existed. Different paths, same silence, but I was starting to learn that silence too could be a weapon. Mumbai was supposed to be the defining moment of my career. It was the kind of mission most people train their entire lives for and never see. High risk, high impact, high clearance. It was a coordinated intelligence intercept designed to prevent a multinational escalation. One wrong call and the consequences would ripple across oceans. I was the lead. I crafted the surveillance strategy. I ran the simulations. I identified the local assets, confirmed the data sources, calculated the risk ratios. My fingerprints were on every inch of the operation. My name was listed on the original mission order top line, above 3 senior officers. I earned that placement. I earned it. For weeks I worked 20-hour days, slept in the ops room, ate protein bars at my desk. I personally coordinated with our cyber unit to block 4 red flag transactions that would have triggered a network of sleeper agents. We stopped it, before it happened, before the world knew how close it had come. And still, my name vanished. The mission was classified for 3 weeks. After it was declassified and the commendations were issued, I wasn't even mentioned in the official memo, not once. The name on the summary, Captain Drew Halley, a liaison officer from logistics. Someone who wasn't present for briefings, who didn't run ops, who hadn't even stepped foot in Mumbai until the final 48 hours, after all major pieces were in motion. He forwarded a map I had created, that's all. And somehow that was enough for him to be awarded the Navy Cross. I remember sitting in the dark in my bunk, reading the press release. My name wasn't in the first paragraph, or the second, or anywhere. At first I thought it was an error. I waited a day, then 2. I submitted a formal correction to the department's commendations office. No reply. I followed up. Silence. Then came the reassignment notice. No explanation, just orders. I was removed from my post and transferred to a stateside facility under the guise of rotation. My request for review was marked closed. I didn't need someone to explain what had happened. I had seen this play out before, just never with stakes this high. Someone powerful wanted me invisible. Someone made a choice to credit a man who hadn't done the work, to erase a woman who had carried the weight. The worst part wasn't losing the medal. It wasn't the silence. It was knowing I'd never even been considered for recognition. Like I was never in the room to begin with. When the internal team published the mission breakdown, they used the exact terminology I'd developed in private memos. Terms no one else would have used. My language, my framework, stolen, no citation, no acknowledgement. Just taken. I remember showing the final report to my superior, a colonel I trusted. He read the first page, closed the folder, and said, "It happens." That was it. It happens. Like it was a weather pattern, like it was gravity, like women in intelligence should just accept that their work lives better in the background. I walked out of his office with my jaw locked, my fist tight, and one thought repeating in my head, not this time. I didn't know how yet, or when, but I knew I wouldn't let it go. Because this wasn't just about credit. It was about erasure, about the slow surgical theft of identity, about being told over and over in 100 subtle ways that you are replaceable, forgettable, expendable. But I wasn't. I had names, documents, chains of command. I had the original brief, the time-stamped simulations, the raw data. I had everything I needed, except one thing, leverage. And that's when I understood I couldn't win this from within the system. Not as Rebecca, the compliant officer. I had to become someone else. Someone who didn't need their permission to be seen. Mumbai didn't break me. It awakened me. They stole my name once. They would never do it again. I filed the report 3 days after the Mumbai debrief. I waited until the dust settled, until the press releases had circulated, until the Navy Cross had been handed to the wrong man. Then I gathered the documents, copies of orders, internal memos, satellite data tagged with my operator code, and submitted a formal complaint through the internal redress system. I didn't expect a medal, I didn't expect a parade, but I did expect a response. 48 hours passed, then 72. Nothing. So I called the Office of Military Commendations. The line rang 6 times before a voice answered, dry, mechanical, distant. Commendations Division, state your case ID. I read it out. There was a pause. Then the voice said, yes, it's marked received. I waited for more. Instead, I heard, thank you for following up. Then the line went dead. I stared at the phone, not angry, just cold. Like someone had turned down the temperature in the room. The phrase marked received was the administrative equivalent of a shrug. It didn't mean the file was being read, or reviewed, or routed to anyone who mattered. It meant, we've seen it. Now stop asking. I submitted a second inquiry. This time I included an addendum with additional logs. I highlighted the specific conflict between the initial mission draft bearing my clearance ID and the final mission order signed off under Holly's name. No reply. I called again. Same voice, same answer. Yes, it's on file. Another pause. Is there anything else, ma'am? There was. 100 things. Why had the credit changed at the last minute? Why had my name been scrubbed? Why was Holly promoted for forwarding a file I built? Why had I been reassigned? But I didn't say any of those things, because I already knew what would happen if I pushed harder. I would be flagged. Not publicly, not officially, quietly, silently. The way they isolate officers who disrupt narrative. The way they manage women who don't smile and move on. It doesn't come with warning signs. It doesn't show up in a memo. It starts with being left off calendar invites, then being moved off the team, then transferred to a unit with no upward mobility, all wrapped in polite language rotation, realignment, resource optimization. I'd seen it happen to others. Now it was happening to me. A week passed, then another. No word, no update, no acknowledgement. The silence wasn't accidental. It was strategic. because if no one replies, no one is responsible. If no one reviews the claim, no one has to answer for the truth. Eventually, I received a sealed envelope. It was not a reply to my complaint. It was a reassignment notice, effective immediately. New command, new office. Domestic posting, no explanation. I asked my commanding officer why. He looked at me for a long moment, then said, "These things happen." I remember that phrase more than any detail from the operation itself. These things happen, as if integrity were a minor casualty. As if erasure were just another form of compliance. I stared at him. No anger, no argument. Just a quiet understanding. He wasn't the villain. He was the system. And the system was not built to reward people like me. It was built to contain them, to use them, to strip them of credit before their names carried weight. I packed my things that night. No ceremony, no goodbyes. Just files in a duffel and a silence that felt like concrete. I walked past Hallie in the hallway on my way out. He nodded, gave me that grin officers use when they're pretending nothing is wrong. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He'd already taken what he came for, and the system had let him. That was the moment I stopped believing someone would fix this for me. That someone at the top would see the report and say, "This isn't right." Because they wouldn't. Because they didn't want to. And because people like me don't rise through petitions. We rise through proof. And I had it. I just needed to wait for the right time. And when that time came, I wouldn't be asking for anything. I would be returning for what was mine. The reassignment letter came on a Monday morning. There was no meeting, no explanation. Just an envelope on my desk when I arrived. Cream-colored, no header, no human signature. It was typed in standard military format, effective immediately. I was to report to a domestic logistics unit in Virginia. A civilian-adjacent command, low visibility, no classified work, no field activity, a place where careers went to drift or disappear. There was no mention of Mumbai, no mention of the complaint I had filed, no mention of anything that mattered, just coordinates, orders, and silence. I sat at my desk and stared at the paper for a long time. My coffee went cold before I touched it. The letters blurred, but I didn't blink. I read it 5 times. Reassignment, not punishment, not demotion, just removal, clean, quiet, surgical. I looked up. Around the office, people moved like normal, keys clacking, phones ringing, a rhythm I used to be part of. But something had shifted. No one met my eyes. Not my analyst. Not the junior officer who used to bring me intel summaries. Not the chief of staff who had once said I had the sharpest instincts in the room. They saw me, but they didn't see me. It was as if the system had pressed delete and everyone else got the memo but me. I stood up and walked the perimeter, just once. Slow. Not to say goodbye, just to observe. Faces turned politely away. Conversations lowered. A few people nodded. Brief, awkward. Eyes full of guilt they didn't want to own. That was when I knew I had become dangerous. Not because I had done something wrong, but because I had dared to point out that something was. Systems don't like questions. They like order, stability, silence. And I was no longer silent. I packed my things without ceremony. A few files, a half-used notebook, a coin my father once gave me from his first command. I paused over that coin. It used to mean something, legacy, lineage. Now it just felt heavy. I placed it at the bottom of my bag. As I zipped it shut, Hallie walked by. He didn't slow, he didn't smile, just a small nod. Casual, practiced. The kind of gesture you give to someone you think won't fight back. I didn't return it. I didn't look away either. Because I wanted him to see it. Not rage, not accusation, just memory. He'd remember this moment, the quiet before the reckoning. I turned in my badge at the front desk. The clerk barely looked up. I wasn't on the list anymore. No badge, no clearance, no seat at the table. By the time I stepped into the parking lot, I was already forgotten. It was raining lightly, enough to blur the windshield but not enough to hide the truth. I sat in the driver's seat for a long while, hands resting on the wheel, unsure where to go. The reassignment report said Virginia. But I knew better. They weren't moving me. They were shelving me. And I wasn't going to play along. That night I checked into a hotel 2 hours north. No calls, no emails. I watched the ceiling until morning. White, plain, uncomplicated. I had never felt so erased, but I had also never felt so certain. Because when a machine this large tries to make you vanish, it usually means you were closer to the truth than they want to admit. I wasn't gone. I was awake. They had taken my credit, my mission, my momentum. But they had made one mistake. They left me with my mind. And my memory, and that was all I needed. Because there is a kind of justice that doesn't ask for approval. It just waits. And when it arrives, it does not knock. It enters with the force of every silent name, every erased report, every closed-door meeting where power believed itself safe. That's what they didn't see. I wasn't alone, and I wasn't done. I disappeared without telling anyone. No forwarding address, no farewell drinks, no polite explanation. I booked a one-way ticket to Montana and rented a cabin at the edge of a forgotten town, 3 hours from the nearest base, 5 from the nearest city. It had no internet, no cable. Barely enough cell reception to send a signal flare. That was the point. I didn't want to be reached. I didn't want to be reminded. I didn't want to be anyone's case number or sidebar whisper or whispered cautionary tale. I wanted to be alone. The cabin was small, 1 room, pine floors, wood stove, a table, a bed, a single narrow bookshelf with a cracked spine dictionary and an outdated field medical guide. The windows faced east. Every morning I woke up to a wash of gray light and the sound of wind brushing through dry grass. I didn't wear my uniform, not once. I folded it and placed it in the footlocker I carried with me, laid it flat beneath a copy of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Then I shut the lid. I wasn't there to be a soldier. I was there to study the system that tried to break me. Every morning I brewed coffee strong enough to burn through memory. Then I sat at the small table and opened a law book. I started with the foundational doctrine case history chain of command procedures, whistleblower policies, codes of conduct, statutory timelines. Then I moved to incident records, advisory memos, internal dispute precedent. Some nights I dreamed in regulation numbers, Article 138, Article 92, Section 806B. Each rule was a brick, each exception a crack. And somewhere in that wall I would find the opening I needed. I wasn't building a case, not yet. I was building an understanding, a language, a blueprint. Because if I was going to be erased, I needed to know exactly how they did it and how to undo every step. I took notes in a lined notebook, no digital copies, no backups. I didn't trust the cloud. I didn't trust much of anything, really. My handwriting got tighter as the days passed, cleaner, like my mind was sharpening with each entry. I lived simply, oatmeal for breakfast, rice and canned beans at night. A single lamp lit the room after sundown. I went days without speaking, weeks without seeing another face. And yet I didn't feel lost. I felt precise. Pain has a way of clarifying things. It strips away the noise, the politeness, the should-haves, and what-ifs. It leaves behind only the truth. And truth, when it's all you have left, becomes more than survival. It becomes purpose. I didn't check the news. I didn't ask about Landon. I didn't want to know what he was saying or doing or claiming. Because whatever narrative he'd spun about Mumbai, whatever version of the story made him the hero, would crumble the moment I returned. And I would return, not out of spite, out of necessity. Justice is not a feeling. It's a function, a design. It exists to balance weight, to restore alignment, not to make people feel better, but to make the world less crooked. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to accuse. I was going to reveal. piece by piece, line by line, not just what had been done to me, but how the structure allowed it. That was the true wound. Not the betrayal itself, the machinery that protected it. I stayed in that cabin for 42 days. On the 43rd, I stood in the doorway and watched the sun rise. My hands were steady, my mind clear. I had memorized the policies. I had marked every deviation. I had mapped the silence. And I knew when the time came, I wouldn't need permission to speak. I would carry the truth like a blade. And I would cut my name back into the record, for good. Her name was Keller, Emily Keller. We first met 7 years earlier on a remote deployment in Kandahar. She was a junior signals officer then, nervous, brilliant, and overlooked by everyone but me. I saw the patterns in her mind, the way she could slice through encryption like silk. I told her once quietly that she'd be running her own division one day. She didn't believe me, but she remembered it. After Mumbai, after the reassignment, after the silence, I remembered her too. She was stationed at Fort Meade now. I checked. Cyber Division, Clearance Level Delta. Her name showed up in a few internal briefings I still had archived. I knew reaching out would be risky. She was still active, still inside the system. But I also knew her loyalty didn't lie with faces or ranks. It lay with the truth. I sent a single message through a secure channel. No subject line, no greeting, just one sentence. "Do you trust me enough to help me prove something?" She replied in 8 minutes. "Yes. What do you need?" I didn't send everything at once. I gave her dates, operation codes, task force tags. I told her I was looking for internal system logs from the Mumbai operation. Not the public files, the back-end activity timestamps, access trails, change logs, anything that could show manipulation. She didn't ask why. 3 days later, she called me from a scrambled line. "I found something," she said, "but you're not going to like it." My heart thudded once hard. I kept my voice steady. "Tell me." There was an override logged at 200 the night before the final mission order was sent. It changed the lead attribution line, removed your designation, replaced it with Hallie's. "Who approved it?" I asked. Silence. Then, the authorization key. It was issued from Landon Ross's terminal. For a second, I didn't breathe. Not because I didn't suspect, but because suspicion and confirmation live in different rooms. One whispers, the other detonates. She continued. "The signature matches his key pattern. It's not a shared station. This wasn't a relay mistake." She sent me the packet. I opened it on a secure tablet, fingers cold, eyes scanning the strings of code and metadata. There it was, the edit, logged, tracked, unambiguous. My name struck through. Hallie's inserted. Approved by user ID LR75ADM, Landon, my brother. The same man who used to walk me to the bus stop when I was 6. Who taught me how to skip stones. Who stood next to me at our grandfather's funeral and squeezed my hand when I couldn't stop shaking. He had signed away my name. He hadn't just stood by while I was erased. He had picked up the pen. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. Keller's voice was quiet in my ear. "I'm sorry, I didn't want to believe it either." I thanked her. She didn't ask what I was going to do next, because she already knew. Before we hung up, she said one more thing. "I printed a hard copy, just in case. Filed it under a ghost account. Nobody will find it unless I want them to." She was still that nervous, brilliant officer. Only now she wasn't overlooked. She was the fulcrum. And I had my first piece of proof. It wasn't enough yet. Not for what I needed. But it was the start of something irreversible. And once the truth starts moving, there's no putting it back in the drawer. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't even curse his name. I just whispered one line to the empty room, my voice steady. "You really did it." And from that moment on, I wasn't guessing anymore. I was documenting. And Landon Ross, my brother, my betrayer, was officially under investigation. He just didn't know it yet. It was buried in a thread no one thought to scrub. An archived email chain nested 3 levels deep in a project folder marked Joint Strategy Council Administrative. Hidden but not encrypted. Because when people think they're untouchable, they stop hiding things well. Keller found it while running a cross-reference between Landon's terminal activity and external message routing. She wasn't even looking for it. She just followed a bounce-back trail that flagged an unapproved attachment. A simple PDF. It led to a conversation between Landon and a man named Elliot Grant, civilian liaison to the Defense Strategy Council. Keller forwarded it to me without commentary. Just the header and the body. And there it was. She won't play the game. Give it to Hallie. She's clean but too rigid. Too by the book. Doesn't know how to navigate optics. You want someone promotable, you pick someone pliable. You give it to Hallie, I'll back him publicly. And when the dust settles, we talk about my seat on the board. Quietly, I read it twice before I could move. Then again, slower, the words didn't shock me. What shook me was how casual they were, how plainly my career had been negotiated like an asset, not a person. He didn't just trade my recognition, he bartered with my silence, for influence, for access, for power. I had always known Landon was ambitious. From childhood, he'd chased validation like it owed him something. But this wasn't ambition. This was calculation. A brother who used to split birthday cake with me had turned my work into currency. She won't play the game. That's what he said. And he was right. I didn't know how to network through manipulation. I didn't know how to win at politics without truth. I wasn't built for backrooms and handshakes traded like secrets. I was built for precision, for structure, for accountability. And that made me a threat. Not because I was reckless, but because I couldn't be bought. Landon didn't frame me. He didn't have to. He just stepped aside while the machine digested me, then collected the favor he was promised. The rest of the thread continued in the same tone. Elliot replied, Hallie's mediocre but visible. He takes direction. Landon mediocrity is easier to manage. I'll make sure he gets what he needs. No mention of my name again. Just an erasure so complete, it didn't even require discussion. As if I'd never existed. I sat in the corner of the cabin with the email open on my screen, the only light coming from the device itself. Outside, the wind scraped the pine trees like sandpaper. My coffee had gone cold. My breath was steady. There it was, motive, proof of collusion, evidence of intent, not just a clerical error, not an accidental reassignment, a transaction. I knew what this meant. Legally, structurally. I also knew what it meant personally. That the man I had once trusted with every secret, who had sat next to me at graduations and grandparents' funerals, had considered me a speed bump on his path to elevation. He didn't try to stop my fall. He orchestrated it. I should have felt rage. I should have screamed. But all I felt was clarity. They hadn't just underestimated me. They had left their fingerprints on the deal. And once you leave fingerprints, you leave a trail. I copied the thread to an external drive, stored it on a military-grade flash with encrypted key access. Then I printed one hard copy and sealed it in a plastic envelope taped beneath the drawer of the cabin desk. Because the truth once found doesn't belong to memory alone, it belongs to record. I wrote a single note in the margin of the email, 5 words. This is where it turns. Because it had. Not in public, not yet, but inside me. Everything shifted. I no longer wanted recognition. I wanted correction, not revenge, restoration. And now I had the blueprint. Some truths are best read. Others, you have to hear. It was Keller who found the recording. She wasn't even looking for audio. She was digging through time-stamped comms logs, trying to trace the metadata from the override order that stripped my name from the Mumbai op. Buried inside a flagged packet from an encrypted briefing room recorder, she stumbled on a short clip 93 seconds long. Logged, archived, forgotten. She didn't send it right away. She called first. I answered in 2 rings. You sitting down, she asked. I told her I was. Because you need to hear it yourself. She forwarded the file. It came with no subject line, just a single word in the body. Listen. I put my phone on airplane mode, locked the cabin door, and sat at the table. The room was still. No wind. No background noise. just the low hum of something about to change. I pressed play. The audio crackled for half a second, then stabilized. I heard chairs being moved. Someone cleared their throat. Then Landon's voice came through, calm, composed, too casual for what he was about to say. She's going to push back on the schedule. Don't fight her too hard. Just press. Nudge the command window. Get her to deploy before the satellite pass. A pause. Then Hallie's voice slightly uncertain. You think she'll go for it, Landon again, firmer now. Push her to launch early. If it blows, she takes the fall. Silence. No protest. No pause. Just those words hanging in the air like poison mist. If it blows, she takes the fall. I paused the recording. Not because I couldn't bear to hear more, because I didn't need to. That was the moment. The cut with no hesitation. The betrayal without stutter. He didn't stammer, didn't question, didn't weigh the ethics. He just gave the order. It wasn't spur of the moment. It wasn't reactive. It was calculated, cold, deliberate. I replayed it. Once, then again, slower. The cadence of his voice, the ease with which he said my name, the precision in his wording. He knew me. He knew how I operated. He knew I would resist the timing, but that I wouldn't escalate the objection. He knew how I followed the chain of command, how I deferred when pressured, how I absorbed risks so others wouldn't have to. He used all of it. He didn't just remove me, he weaponized my discipline to ensure I wouldn't fight back. That was the final confirmation. Not just that he'd taken my name off a report, not just that he'd traded my career for a favor, but that he had sent me into failure. On purpose. I sat in the cabin for a long time after that. The file still open, the light from my screen casting sharp shadows against the wooden walls. I thought about the last time Landon and I spoke face to face, the medal ceremony 2 years ago. The one where he was honored for outstanding operational leadership in regions he barely understood. He had smiled when he saw me, put a hand on my shoulder. Still doing the sneaky stuff in the shadows, huh? He said it like a joke, but now I knew what it really was. A smirk from a man who already knew he'd stepped on my shoulders to climb. I didn't feel rage. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. What I felt was deeper, colder, quieter. A stillness I couldn't explain. The kind of stillness that comes when the final puzzle piece drops into place, and the picture staring back at you is worse than you imagined, but somehow exactly what you suspected all along. I closed the file, backed it up twice. One copy to Keller, one to a private drive sealed in metal and locked away. The third stayed on the device. I wasn't ready to use it yet, but I would. Because sometimes justice doesn't arrive with gavel or gun. Sometimes it arrives in a whisper, a voice, a single sentence you were never meant to hear. And once you hear it, you can never unhear it. And neither can they. There's a kind of silence that doesn't feel empty. It feels like trust. After hearing the recording, Landon's voice sealing my fate with 10 words, I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I just sat, phone in hand, staring at a name I hadn't contacted in almost 6 years. Major Talia Monroe. Our last exchange was brief and covered in sand. Djibouti 600 hours emergency evac under hostile fire. She was bleeding from the shoulder, half conscious, trying to keep her platoon together after their convoy was ambushed. I was the only medic who made it through the blast zone that day. I got her out alive. She'd once said anything, anytime. Now I was holding her to it. I wrote the message slowly, without bitterness. No dramatic buildup, no demand for help. Just facts. Just truth. I attached the recording, the metadata logs, the override forms, and a timeline. A clean, structured chronological map of how my identity, my command, and my credit had been peeled away layer by layer until I was invisible. Then I wrote the last line, I'm not asking for favors. I'm asking for fairness. And I need someone inside the room when this begins. I pressed send and waited. For 3 hours, nothing. I walked outside. The Montana snow had started to melt, leaving small veins of brown in the white. I watched a hawk circle above the tree line, graceful, focused, lethal. I used to feel like that. Before they grounded me, when I came back inside, the reply was there. Short, just one line. We believe you. Formal review begins tomorrow. No salutation, no sign-off. But I felt the weight of it. And the shift. It wasn't just belief, it was movement. Major Monroe didn't waste time with ceremonial empathy. She was old school, a decision maker, and she knew exactly what she was reading. The next morning, I received the encrypted upload link. Then came the contact details for the internal military tribunal liaison. Not the usual backdoor complaints unit, but an actual investigation panel. Joint Intelligence Ethics Committee and a military legal observer. There was a name at the bottom, Lieutenant Felix Brenner. A name I remembered from another life back when we were cadets. Quiet, methodical, annoyingly precise. He was their chosen handler, which meant this was real, and someone high up wanted it clean. I sent everything, files, notes, dates, witnesses. I even included a copy of my journal entries, carefully selected around the Mumbai incident. Nothing emotional, just detailed logs of what was said by whom and when. Notes I had written not knowing I'd ever need them. Notes that now held weight. Within 48 hours, I received confirmation preliminary hearing scheduled. Talia had made it happen. She hadn't vouched for me. She hadn't needed to. She'd let the evidence speak. That was the kind of help I needed. Not rescue, not pity, just space to be heard. I stared at her message again. We believe you. There was something deeply healing about that sentence. Something I hadn't realized I was desperate for. Not just to be believed, but to be seen, acknowledged. Given the dignity of being taken seriously, I thought about all the doors that had stayed shut before, the calls that went unanswered, the emails that were received but never read. I had been shouting into a sealed chamber. Now someone had cracked the seal. And not just anyone. A woman I once carried on my back through mortar fire was now carrying me through bureaucracy, through disbelief, through silence. Talia Monroe. No medals for this, no cameras. Just a simple message and the machinery of justice slowly creaking to life behind it. I didn't cry, but I felt something shift inside my ribs. Something like breath I hadn't realized I was holding. They tried to erase me, but you can't erase the truth. And now the truth had a witness. And soon it would have a hearing. I didn't attend the closed-door hearing. Not because I didn't want to, but because I was advised not to. Let the evidence speak, Talia had said. You've already done your part, so I waited. In a small cafe near the base, 2 hours before dawn, wrapped in a civilian coat with nothing but a plain mug of black coffee and a notebook. I didn't write anything, just sat, listening, watching the light creep in through the frosted glass. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number, I picked up. This is Lieutenant Felix Brenner, the voice said. Steady, crisp. The board has reached a decision. May I proceed? I nodded even though he couldn't see me. First Captain Hallie Drummond. Effective immediately, she is stripped of her commission and dishonorably discharged. All prior honors rescinded. A formal statement will be issued within 48 hours. I closed my eyes. I felt no joy, no victory, just release. Felix continued. Second Commander Landon Ross, removed from active command. All promotions suspended indefinitely. Under review for ethical misconduct, including willful sabotage and career manipulation. Further legal proceedings pending. I didn't flinch. I thought I would. But I didn't. Because the betrayal had already settled so deep into my bones, this wasn't new pain. It was just paperwork catching up. And Third Felix said the panel has agreed to full restoration of your record. All leadership credits for Operation Mumbai have been reassigned under your name. Your prior ranking is reinstated. Additionally, due to exemplary service, the board has authorized an accelerated promotion. He paused. To Field Marshal, my throat tightened, not from pride, but from the quiet echo of every room I'd ever stood in without a nameplate. Every ceremony I watched from the sidelines. Every time they said she's just logistics or she's administrative. Field Marshal, the highest honor in my division, awarded not because I fought for it, but because I had been denied it long enough. There will be a public ceremony, Felix added. 2 weeks from now, you will be briefed separately. Do you accept the findings? I said nothing for a moment. My hands were trembling, but I kept my voice still. I accept. Thank you, ma'am, Felix said. On behalf of the board and the service, you are seen. Then the line went dead, and I just sat there, in that little cafe, still anonymous to the world outside, still invisible to the morning rush, just another woman with coffee and a story no one knew. But something had changed, not outside, inside. I didn't need headlines or applause. Justice didn't look like a parade. It looked like truth finally allowed to breathe. I walked out into the cold. No coat could stop that wind from cutting through me, but I stood taller. And when I passed by the recruiting poster of Landon still smiling from a campaign 2 years old, I didn't look away. I looked straight at it and kept walking, because that chapter was closed. Not with revenge, but with record. Not with anger, but with acknowledgement. And as the sun rose behind me, I knew they took my name. But I took it back, not with war, with proof. 2 days after the verdict, a letter arrived. Thick envelope, embossed seal, hand-delivered by a courier in full dress uniform. I opened it slowly, already sensing what lay inside. An invitation, formal, regal, to the Joint Forces Valor Recognition Ceremony. The date was set, the venue a grand military auditorium I knew too well, and the honorary Commander Landon Ross, my brother, the man who tried to erase me. I reread the name. The gold ink shimmered under the morning light, like it was trying to make the lie look beautiful. At the bottom, a handwritten note in the faint blue pen would mean a lot if you were there. Mom, no apology, no acknowledgement, just a request to keep playing the part I was assigned years ago, the silent sister supportive, small, invisible. I placed the invitation on the counter, walked away, made coffee, stared out the window, but the letter stayed. And by dusk, I'd made my decision. I would go, not for Mom, not for Landon, but for the truth they tried to bury, for the space I'd earned with blood and silence, and for the version of me that they all tried so hard not to see. The ceremony was scheduled for a Friday evening. Full military honors, dress code formal, seating chart strictly enforced. When I arrived, the lobby buzzed with photographers and sharp-creased officers. No one recognized me. I liked it that way. I walked past the front rows, reserved for family. I saw my father adjusting his tie. My mother dabbing her eyes, not from grief, but pride. Pride for Landon. He stood at the center of the aisle, shaking hands, posing for pictures. Confident, untouched. He hadn't been told yet. Not publicly, not officially. The board's decision would be announced after the ceremony. Strategic, surgical. I found my assigned seat far back near the exit, a shadow in the crowd. The announcer began. Medals were pinned. Speeches delivered. I clapped politely. I stood when others stood. Then Landon's name was called. He walked up, smiling, saluting, accepting a plaque for tactical leadership and unwavering excellence. My stomach tightened, but I didn't look away. I didn't come to shame him. I came to exist. And when he turned toward the crowd, scanning for faces, our eyes met. For a moment, something in him faltered, just briefly, like a wire inside his performance snapped loose. But then the applause drowned it out. He finished his speech, thanked his team, praised his upbringing. And not once did he mention Mumbai. After the ceremony, I stood in the outer lobby waiting for the storm of uniforms and flashbulbs to pass. Then I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Hallie, civilian clothes, pale, small. She looked at me like she'd seen a ghost. "I didn't know you'd come," she whispered. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I wasn't there to speak. I was there to be seen. She stepped back, her eyes wet. You weren't supposed to survive this. I let the silence speak for me. Behind her, Landon appeared, his smile gone. He stopped a few feet away, unsure whether to greet me or flee. For the first time in years, I watched him hesitate. And I realized I didn't hate him. He was small, smaller than I'd ever imagined. And I had become something too large for his stage. So I turned. Not in anger, not in triumph. Just with the grace of someone who finally knew I had nothing to prove to men who mistook silence for weakness. That night I walked into a ceremony meant to honor him. But I walked out carrying something far greater, my own name. And the quiet dignity of survival. Tools? The air changed when my name was called. Not Landon's, not Hallie's, mine. Field Marshal Rebecca Ross. The words echoed through the auditorium like a verdict. A pause, a breath. Then every chair scraped back in unison. Every boot hit the ground. The entire auditorium stood. Uniforms, medals, even generals with decades of service all rose to their feet. For me. From the corner of my vision, I saw my mother's hand fly to her mouth. Not in pride, not in awe, in shock. My father stayed seated a second longer than the rest, his eyes frozen, his knuckles white on the chair's edge. Then slowly he rose, like he wasn't sure what the protocol was when the daughter you dismissed became someone the nation now saluted. And Landon. He stood too, but not for me. He stood because the rules required him to. His smile didn't reach his eyes. His hands trembled slightly as he applauded. His expression wore the mask of grace, tight, formal, frozen. But behind his eyes something cracked. And I saw it. I walked down the aisle. The room parted like water. No music played. No one announced my credentials. They didn't have to. The insignia on my uniform said more than any speech. I passed my family. Didn't stop. Didn't glance. I wasn't there to gloat. I wasn't there to hurt them. But I also wasn't there to pretend they hadn't tried to erase me. When I reached the stage, the commander, an older woman I had only met once, shook my hand firmly and said not into the microphone, but just to me. "It's about damn time," I smiled. Just a little. Enough to let her know I heard her. Enough to let the room know I belonged. As the applause faded, I took my seat on stage 2 rows above Landon. I didn't look down. I didn't need to. Because I knew he could feel the heat of my presence like a spotlight on every lie he ever told. After the ceremony ended, the crowd surged toward the reception area. But I lingered by the back wall, watching families reunite, commanders embrace their teams, old soldiers clasp hands with younger ones. That's when I saw him. Landon. Walking toward me slow, alone. His uniform perfect, his shoes polished. But something about him seemed unmoored. He stopped just a few feet away. "Rebecca." He said it like it was the first time, like he needed to hear it aloud to believe I still existed. I waited. He cleared his throat. "You should have told me," he said. "Told you what I replied, that you were going to be honored, that you were even back." I raised an eyebrow. "You're the one who made sure I disappeared." His jaw tightened. "That wasn't my decision alone." "No," I said. "But you signed your name on it." He looked away. People were watching. They always watched him, but in that moment, no one cared. I was the story now. He glanced back at me, this time quieter, smaller. "You were never supposed to be hurt like that. I didn't know they'd cut you out entirely." I let his words sit between us. Weak, too late. "You didn't have to know," I said. "You chose not to see." He flinched. Then he whispered, almost too low to hear, "I thought you'd fade away." I took a breath. "I don't fade," I said. "I endure." My mother appeared beside him then. Eyes red, shoulders shaking. She looked at me, tears running freely now. "We didn't understand, Rebecca." I nodded once. Not with forgiveness, but acknowledgement. "You didn't have to understand," I said. "Just not erase me." My father hovered behind them, silent. When I looked at him, he dropped his eyes, his hands folded in front of him like a cadet being reprimanded. There was no rage left in me, no fire, only clarity. "You always said Landon was the future," I said softly. But I was the one walking into every war without applause. They didn't answer, they didn't have to. Their silence for once told the truth. I stepped back, not to leave, but to move beyond them. "I'm not here to shame you," I added, "but I won't let you rewrite me." Landon blinked fast. "I thought we were family," I smiled gently. "You taught me something valuable," I said. "That blood doesn't make family, loyalty does." And with that, I turned. Not because I was walking away from them, but because I had somewhere better to go. Somewhere mine, somewhere earned. And this time, I didn't look back. I didn't stay for the reception. No champagne, no toasts, no awkward family photos with forced smiles and trembling hands. I walked out the side entrance of the auditorium alone, medals clinking softly against my chest, their weight far heavier than the metal they were forged from. The night air was crisp, the kind that reminds you you're still alive, even after being told for years you weren't enough to be seen. I stood at the edge of the steps, watching cars roll away, handshakes exchanged, officers and dignitaries disappearing into warmth and celebration. But I didn't envy them, because I had no need for the tables I'd once begged to sit at. Growing up, I spent so many dinners quiet, sidelined, watching Landon lead conversations like a seasoned diplomat. My father beaming, my mother pouring wine as if she were tending to royalty, and me, the background blur, the one they always forgot to introduce, the one whose name was never etched into the silver frames on the mantel. I used to wonder if I'd ever be invited, not just to the table but into their world. But tonight proved something I had spent decades trying to unlearn. I didn't need an invitation. I had built my own table, and it didn't sit in a decorated banquet hall or a government reception room. It stood metaphorically in every moment I refused to give up, every deployment where I showed up even when no one was watching, every mission I led knowing no one would thank me, every file I studied, every soldier I mentored, every letter I wrote to grieving families. Not because it earned me medals, but because someone had to do it. I built my table from silence, from grit, from being told no and showing up anyway. I sat on no family tree branch that bore pride, yet I became the root they tried to hide and still couldn't kill. That night, as I walked to my car, a junior officer ran to catch up. "Ma'am, Field Marshal Ross," he said breathlessly. I stopped expecting a procedural question, a request for protocol clarification. Instead, he just looked at me, his voice cracked. "Thank you," he said, "for showing me that it's possible." He didn't say what, he didn't have to. I nodded once, firm, then drove away, not toward a party, not toward applause, but toward something quieter, more enduring, a life where I defined my worth, not by who clapped, but by who I became when they didn't. So no, I wasn't at their table anymore. I was sitting at mine. And it was solid, wide, unshakable, built from years of rejection, betrayal, and quiet persistence. The kind of table no one could pull a chair from under me ever again. To the quiet ones, the ones who stayed behind while others were celebrated. To the ones whose names were misspelled, misplaced, or never spoken at all. To those who sat in the back rows, not because they didn't deserve the front, but because someone told them they didn't belong. I see you. To the daughters who became shadows in homes built on hierarchy. To the professionals who were called lucky when they'd bled for every inch. To the soldiers whose uniforms carried pride, but not permission to speak. This story is for you. It's not for the ones who rose on wings given to them. It's for those of us who walked, stumbled, crawled, and still arrived. For years I thought silence was my weakness. I mistook quiet for surrender. But I've learned that silence can be sacred. A space where resilience is forged, where conviction sharpens quietly until the day you finally speak, and the world can no longer look away. I didn't ask to be noticed. I just refuse to disappear. And that's what I want you to carry with you. You don't need a podium to hold power. You don't need an audience to prove you matter. You just need to remember, even when the room is cold, even when no one calls your name, you are not invisible. You are not forgettable. You are not alone. Because somewhere out there, someone else is building their table. One truth at a time. One scar at a time. One step forward, even with shaking legs. So if today is the day you're still waiting for recognition, for justice, or even just for someone to say, I see you, let this story be that voice. Let it be the start of your own. You were never erased. They just didn't know where to look. Before we say goodbye, I'd love to ask, where are you watching from? Is it a quiet morning with a warm cup of coffee, or a late night where stories like this keep you company? Let me know in the comments. I read everyone with gratitude. And if this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel. Not just to hear more stories like this, but to be part of a community that still believes in kindness, healing, and second chances. Thank you for spending your time with me today. Wherever you are, I hope you carry this story with you, and remember, sometimes the miracle doesn't knock on your door. It waits quietly until you're ready to open your heart. Take care, and I'll see you in the next story.